The sun dipped low over the cracked asphalt of Route 17, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across the dusty pull-off. Ethan Blackwood had pulled his weathered Harley to the side hours ago, the engine ticking softly as it cooled, a faint plume of steam rising from the pipes like a sigh of exhaustion. He sat astride the bike, helmet dangling from the handlebar, his calloused hands gripping the grips as if they were the only anchor left in his unraveling world. The desert wind whispered through the scrub brush, carrying the sharp tang of sage and distant rain, but Ethan barely noticed. His eyes, shadowed by a lifetime of regrets, stared at the horizon, where the sky bled orange into purple. A faded tattoo on his forearm, a coiled serpent encircled by the words "Iron Oath," itched under the cooling air, a reminder of promises he'd buried deeper than the graves of his fallen brothers. Farther down the road, in the fading light of a roadside diner called The Last Mirage, a young girl named Lily huddled in the corner booth, her small frame trembling. She was no more than 12, her clothes threadbare and dusted with the grit of too many miles traveled alone. The diner's neon sign flickered erratically, buzzing like a trapped insect, illuminating the fear etched into her wide green eyes. A group of rough-hewn men at the counter, truckers with grease-stained hands and voices laced with liquor, had been watching her for the last hour. Their laughter grew bolder, slurring words that made the waitress avert her gaze. Lily clutched a crumpled napkin, her knuckles white as one of them slid from his stool and sauntered toward her table. "Hey, kid," he drawled, his breath sour with beer. "You lost? Need a ride somewhere safe?" The implication hung heavy in the stale air, thick with the smell of burnt coffee and frying oil. Lily's heart pounded like a trapped bird, her mind flashing to the warnings her mother had whispered before vanishing into the night. Strangers were wolves in human skin. She bolted from the booth, the bell above the door jingling wildly as she burst into the twilight. Her sneakers slapped against the pavement, kicking up pebbles that skittered into the gathering dusk. The men's voices followed, mocking at first, then edged with pursuit. Lily ran blindly, the road blurring through tears, until she spotted the lone motorcycle parked like a sentinel at the pull-off. It was massive, black as midnight, with chrome accents glinting like promises in the dying light. Desperation clawed at her. She veered toward it, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The rider hadn't moved. His broad shoulders slumped, but something about him, the quiet authority in his stillness, drew her like a moth to flame. Ethan heard the footsteps before he saw her, light and frantic against the gravel. He turned slowly, his weathered face creasing with surprise, as the girl skidded to a halt, mere feet from his bike. She was a wisp of a thing, dirt-streaked and wild-eyed, clutching the strap of a small backpack like a lifeline. "Mister," she gasped, her voice cracking with urgency, "you gotta go, now. They're coming, the men from the diner. They said things, bad things, about taking girls like me." Her words tumbled out, laced with a tremor that pierced the armor Ethan had built around his heart. He scanned the road behind her, spotting the silhouettes of headlights piercing the gloom, engines rumbling like distant thunder. For a moment, time hung suspended. Ethan's mind raced back, decades ago, to a rain-slicked battlefield in a forgotten war where he'd made a vow to his squad leader Marcus under the flicker of mortar fire. "Watch out for the little ones, Blackwood," Marcus had said, blood staining his fatigues. His eyes fierce even in death. "The world's full of wolves. Promise me you'll stand for 'em when we can't." Ethan had nodded then, the weight of it sealing like iron in his soul, but life had eroded that oath. Lost jobs, a divorce that carved him hollow, brothers in the club scattered by time and betrayal. He'd ridden alone for years, the Iron Oath MC, a ghost of what it was. His Harley, his only confessor. Lily's plea shattered the silence. "Please," she whispered, stepping closer, her hand brushing the bike's warm tank. My mum. She told me once about a rider who saved her when she was my age. Said he had a snake tattoo and rode like the wind. You're him, aren't you? Or someone like him. Don't let them get me. Her words struck like lightning. Igniting embers Ethan thought long dead. He didn't know her mother, but the coincidence or fate twisted in his gut. The headlights grew brighter, voices carrying on the wind, crude jokes turning to shouts. Ethan's jaw tightened, the old fire rekindling in his veins. He swung his leg over the bike, the leather of his jacket creaking like aged wood. "Get on," he said, voice low and steady. A command wrapped in gravel. Lily hesitated only a second before clambering onto the back, her arms wrapping around his waist with surprising strength. The engine roared to life beneath them, a primal growl that vibrated through their bones, drowning out the approaching threats. Dust billowed as Ethan gunned the throttle, the Harley surging forward like a beast unleashed. The men from the diner swerved their truck to block the road, but Ethan weaved with the precision of a man who'd danced with death before. Tires screeched, horns blared, but he didn't look back. As the miles blurred into night, the wind whipping their faces with the scent of freedom and sagebrush, Ethan felt the weight of that forgotten promise settle anew. Lily's grip tightened, her voice muffled against his back. "Thank you," she murmured, the words carrying over the roar. "You didn't have to." But he knew he did. In saving her, he was saving the man Marcus believed he could be, the one who honored oaths, who built families from the wreckage of loss. The road ahead twisted into darkness, but for the first time in years, Ethan rode toward light, not away from shadows. The diner faded in the rear view, its neon a dying ember. Lily shifted, her backpack pressing against his side. "Where are we going?" she asked, the fear ebbing into tentative trust. Ethan glanced at the stars emerging overhead, pinpricks of guidance in the vast sky. "Somewhere safe," he replied. "I've got people, a club, they'll help." But even as he said it, though doubt gnawed, the iron oath had fractured after the last run-in with corrupt badges up north, a sheriff's deputy who'd shaken them down for protection. Ethan had walked away, vowing never to look back. Yet here he was, pulled by a girl's words into the fray once more. They rode on, the bike's headlight cutting a silver path through the inky black. Ethan's thoughts drifted to the old clubhouse, tucked in the hills beyond the state line, a rambling barn of a place with walls scarred by stories. If he called in the markers, rallied the remnants of the crew, they could shield her. But it meant dredging up the past. The raid that cost them Marcus, the betrayal by a brother who'd sold them out for a badge's favor. Justice, the kind that stuck, wasn't about fists or guns. It was about truth, about standing tall when the world bent you low. Lily's voice broke through again, soft against the wind. "My mom said the rider kept his promise, even when it hurt." Ethan nodded, though she couldn't see it. The serpent on his arm seemed to pulse, alive with purpose. Dawn was hours away, but already the ride had changed everything. A girl had approached his bike, spoken words that bridged the chasm of his isolation. And in that moment, Ethan Blackwood was no longer a ghost on the highway. He was a guardian, reborn in the fire of an old oath, ready to face whatever wolves lay in wait. Word count, 872. The highway unfurled like a ribbon of black silk under the moon's pale gaze, the Harley's headlights slicing through the veil of night. Ethan felt Lily's warmth against his back, a fragile anchor in the rush of wind that carried the earthy scent of creosote bushes and cooling asphalt. The engine's steady thrum vibrated through his bones, a rhythm that echoed the pulse of his resurfacing resolve. Miles slipped away, the diner's threat shrinking to a memory, but Ethan's mind churned with shadows of what lay ahead. The Iron Oath Clubhouse was a day's ride north, nestled in the jagged folds of the Whispering Hills, a place where rusted gates and weathered timber guarded secrets as old as the mountains themselves. He'd sworn off it after the fallout, the raid that claimed Marcus and splintered the Brotherhood like dry lightning through a dead tree. But oaths weren't things you discarded. They were chains you forged in fire, binding you even when they chafed. Lily stirred behind him, her voice cutting through the roar like a whisper in a storm. "Do you have a name?" she asked, her words tentative, laced with the exhaustion of a child who'd run too far. Ethan glanced at the side mirror, catching a glimpse of her pale face illuminated by the bike's glow. "Ethan," he replied, the syllable rough from disuse. "Ethan Blackwood." She nodded against his jacket, the leather creaking softly. "I'm Lily. Just Lily. Mom always said names carry weight, like promises you can't break." Her innocence pierced him, stirring the ghost of his own lost daughter, taken by a custody battle years ago, her laughter now a faint echo in his dreams. He pushed the thought down, focusing on the road's gentle curve, the stars wheeling overhead like silent witnesses. As the hours blurred, the first hints of dawn painted the eastern sky in bruised purples, and Ethan spotted a flickering sign for a forgotten rest stop, a cluster of picnic tables scarred by graffiti, flanked by a single payphone booth that leaned like a weary sentinel. The air grew crisp, laced with the dew-kissed scent of wild grasses. He eased the bike to a halt, the engine's growl fading to a purr before silence enveloped them. Lily slid off, her legs wobbling from the ride, and rubbed her arms against the chill. "We stopping?" she asked, eyes scanning the shadows warily. Ethan nodded, killing the ignition. "Need to make a call. Can't ride blind into this." He swung his leg over, boots crunching on gravel, and fished a handful of quarters from his pocket, remnants of a life lived lean. The payphone's receiver felt cold in his grip, its cord frayed like old nerves. He dialed the number etched into his memory, the one that connected to the clubhouse's backline, away from prying ears. It rang twice before a gravelly voice answered, thick with sleep and suspicion. "Who the hell is this?" Ethan exhaled, the sound of that voice belonging to Caleb, his old vice president, a bear of a man with scars from the same war that had forged them, pulling him back. "It's Blackwood. Ethan, I need the crew." Silence stretched, broken only by the distant hum of a semi on the highway. "Thought you were done with us, brother? After what went down with the badges, you vanished like smoke." Ethan's jaw clenched, the memory of that night flashing lights, shouts, the crack of wood as deputies tore through the clubhouse, all because one of their own had whispered lies for a cut of the graft. "Not done," Ethan said, his voice steady as iron. "Got a kid here. Girl. In trouble. Wolves on her trail from a diner south. She's tied to the old days. Reminds me of Marcus's words." Caleb's breath hitched, the name a talisman between them. Marcus, their founder, who'd pulled them from the gutters and battlefields into a family bound by more than blood. "How bad?" Caleb pressed. Ethan glanced at Lily, who sat on a bench hugging her backpack, her eyes fixed on the horizon where the sun began its slow ascent. "Bad enough to call in markers, rally what we've got left, meet us at the crossroads by noon." A pause, then Caleb's rumble. "You got it, for the oath. But this stirs old ghosts, Ethan. The sheriff's crew, they're still sniffing around, calling us outlaws for breathing wrong." Ethan hung up without another word, the click echoing his resolve. The sun crested now, gilding the landscape in gold, the air alive with the chirp of waking birds and the faint, acrid whiff of exhaust from passing rigs. Lily looked up as he approached, her expression a mix of hope and lingering fear. "Everything okay?" Ethan crouched to her level, the morning light catching the silver threads in his beard. "Yeah, help's coming. But we ride careful. Tell me about your mom. The rider she mentioned, why'd he matter?" Lily's gaze dropped to her hands, twisting the backpack strap. "She was like me once, running from a bad home. He found her by a river, scared out of her mind. Didn't ask questions, just gave her a ride to safety, said his club was about keeping promises, protecting the forgotten. She never forgot. Made me promise to look for someone like that if I ever needed. Her words wove into Ethan's soul, a thread connecting past to present. He didn't know if he was that rider, but in her eyes he saw the reflection of the man he could reclaim. They mounted up again, the Harley awakening with a throaty bellow that scattered the morning mist. As they pulled onto the road, Ethan felt the weight of eyes upon them, or imagined he did. In the mirror, a dust cloud rose far behind, too deliberate to be chance. The men from the diner, or worse, the kind of trouble that followed those who defied the crooked grain of small-town law. The engine's power surged beneath him, propelling them toward the rendezvous, but doubt flickered like heat haze. Rallying the iron oath meant facing not just external threats, but the fractures within. Brothers who drifted to safer lives, others hardened by betrayal. Caleb was loyal, a rock carved from the same stone as Marcus, but trust was a fragile alloy these days. The miles wound through canyons where red rock walls rose like ancient guardians, the sun climbing higher, baking the air with the scent of sun-warmed stone and pine. Lily's arms tightened around him as the bike leaned into a turn, her trust a quiet gift. Ethan thought of the clubhouse, the creak of floorboards under boots, the low murmur of stories around a fire pit. The emblem of the coiled serpent etched into every beam. It was a sanctuary built on oaths, where veterans like him found purpose beyond the roar of war or the grind of civilian forgetfulness. But salvation came at a cost. The sheriff's deputies, emboldened by unchecked power, had labeled them a threat, twisting protection into extortion. To shield Lily meant confronting that corruption head-on, not with rage, but with the unyielding truth of their bond. By mid-morning, the crossroads loomed, a desolate intersection marked by a weathered signpost and a lone cottonwood tree, its leaves rustling like whispered secrets. Ethan slowed, scanning the empty expanse, the heat shimmering off the pavement. Then, from the north, the distant growl of engines swelled, a symphony of Harleys rounding the bend. Caleb led the pack, his massive frame unmistakable on a bike painted matte black, flanked by a dozen riders, remnants of the oath, their jackets bearing the serpent patch like badges of honor. Faces Ethan knew, grizzled mechanics, ex-cops turned guardians, all drawn by the call of brotherhood. They pulled up in a thunderous halt, dust swirling like a veil, and Caleb dismounted, clasping Ethan's forearm in a grip that spoke volumes. "You brought the storm with you, brother," Caleb said, his eyes flicking to Lily, who peered from behind Ethan. "Who's the charge?" Ethan nodded toward her. "Lily, she's under the oath now." The men murmured assent, a ripple of solidarity passing through them. But as the group formed a loose circle, engines idling like watchful hearts, a low rumble echoed from the south, headlights piercing the glare, not friendlies. The wolves had followed, their pursuit a shadow on the wind. Ethan's hand rested on the handlebar, ready, the promise igniting like dawn's first fire. And now, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The crossroads baked under the relentless midday sun, the air thick with the metallic tang of hot chrome and the faint, dusty whisper of wind through the cottonwood's leaves. Engines idled in a low, unified growl, the Iron Oath riders forming a ragged semicircle around Ethan and Lily, their silhouettes cutting sharp against the shimmering horizon. Caleb stood at the forefront, his massive arms crossed over a chest scarred by old shrapnel, eyes narrowed on the approaching dust cloud from the south. It wasn't a mirage, it was pursuit. 3 black and white cruisers kicking up gravel like angry hornets, their sirens silent but lights flashing in silent warning. The sheriff's men, known in these parts as the Tin Wolves for their badge-shined teeth and hollow bites, had a reputation for bending the law to fit their palms. Ethan dismounted slowly, his boots hitting the parched earth with a thud that echoed his steadying heartbeat. Lily clung to his side, her small hand slipping into his larger one, fingers cold despite the heat. The touch grounded him, a reminder of the fragile oath he'd just reignited. "Stay close," he murmured, his voice a low rumble lost in the bike's hum. She nodded, green eyes wide but unflinching, as if the night's terror had forged steel in her spine. The Oath Riders shifted, hands hovering near handlebars, not drawing weapons, but ready in the way only brothers forged in fire could be, silent, unyielding. Caleb spat into the dirt, his grizzled face twisting into a scowl. "Knew this'd stir the pot. That sheriff's got his hooks in every diner from here to the border. Word travels fast when a girl's snatched from under their noses." He glanced at Ethan, the weight of shared history passing between them like a nod in the dark. Caleb had been there the night Marcus fell, holding the line while Ethan pulled the wounded from the chaos of that botched raid. They'd lost 3 that night, to what the badges called collateral, but the Oath knew it for what it was, a shakedown gone bloody, corruption wearing a star. "You sure about this, Blackwood? Rallying for a stranger's kid? It's pulling us all back in." Ethan met his gaze, the serpent tattoo flexing as he clenched his fist. "She's no stranger now. Marcus's words, stand for the little ones. That's the oath, ain't it? Or did we forget after the fractures?" The words hung heavy, stirring murmurs among the riders. There was Jax, a wiry ex-Marine with a limp from the same war, his bike's custom exhaust scarred from dodging checkpoints. Beside him Harlan, broad as a barn door, who'd traded his nurse's scrubs for leathers after the hospital politics chewed him up. They were the family Ethan had walked from, pieced together from veterans' shadows and roadside vows, bound not by blood, but by the unbreakable code of keeping promises when the world turned its back. The cruisers pulled up in a screech of tires, fanning out to block the crossroads like a noose tightening. Dust settled slowly, revealing the lead deputy, a stocky man named Harlan Voss, his uniform crisp but eyes darting like a cornered fox. He stepped out, hand resting casually on his holster, flanked by 2 others, whose faces Ethan recognized from whispers, the kind who patrolled for payoffs, turning blind eyes to the real predators in exchange for envelopes thick with cash. "Blackwood," Voss drawled, his voice oily as spilled motor oil. "Fancy meeting you here. Heard about a disturbance at the Mirage. Little Birdie says you boosted a runaway. That's interference with an ongoing situation." Lily tensed beside Ethan, her breath quickening, but he squeezed her hand gently. A silent shield. The Oath Riders revved their engines in unison, a deep-throated warning that vibrated through the ground like distant thunder. Caleb stepped forward, his presence a wall of weathered oak. "Situation? Sounds like you're chasing shadows, Deputy. Girls with us now? Family business?" Voss's lip curled, scanning the group with thinly veiled contempt. "Family? You lot are a relic. Playing vigilantes on 2 wheels. Sheriff's got reports, girl's got priors, unstable home. We're taking her in for her own good. Hand her over, and maybe we forget the speeding tickets piling up." The air crackled with tension, the sun's glare turning sweat to salt on exposed skin. Ethan felt the old rage simmer, not hot and blind, but cold as desert nights, the kind that came from watching justice twist into a knot for the powerful. He thought of Lily's mother, the phantom rider in her story, an echo of his own buried guilt. Had he failed someone like her once, riding away from a call in the haze of his divorce? The memory clawed at him, sharpening his resolve. "Priors," Ethan said, his tone even, laced with the gravel of truth. "She's running from men who think badges make 'em kings. You know the type. Truckers with friends in high places. Or are you one of 'em?" Voss's face hardened, a flicker of unease breaking his facade as he glanced at his deputies. The crossroads fell silent save for the ticking of cooling engines and the distant cry of a hawk wheeling overhead. Lily lifted her chin, her voice small but clear, cutting through the standoff like a blade. They weren't helping. They wanted to hurt me, like what happened to my mum. The words landed like stones in still water, rippling doubt among the deputies. One shifted uncomfortably, his eyes dropping to the ground, the scent of his cheap cologne mixing with the dry earth. Caleb seized the moment, his voice booming with the authority of a man who'd stared down worse than tin stars. You want her? Go through the oath. But ask yourself if that's worth the truth coming out, the payoffs, the looks the other way while girls like her vanish. Voss hesitated, the weight of unseen eyes pressing in. Whispers of internal affairs had been floating for months, badges turning on badges in the rot of small-town graft. He backed toward his cruiser, barking an order to stand down, but the threat lingered in his parting glare. This ain't over, Blackwood. You'll ride into a wall one day. As the cruisers peeled away, sirens finally wailing in retreat, the Oath Riders erupted in a chorus of whoops and engine revs, the sound a release of pent-up storm. Dust swirled anew as they formed up, a convoy born of necessity. Ethan knelt to Lily's level, the heat rising from the asphalt like steam from a fresh wound. "You were brave back there," he said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. She managed a faint smile, the first real one since the diner. "You all were, like the family Mum talked about." The words sealed it, weaving her into the fabric of their bond, a chosen thread in the tapestry of redemption. They mounted up, the group thundering north toward the whispering hills, the clubhouse a beacon in Ethan's mind, a place of scarred tables and flickering lanterns where stories were traded like ammunition. But as the miles stretched, Ethan couldn't shake the rear view's empty expanse. Voss wouldn't let this slide. The wolves always circled back, hungrier. The road curved through canyons where shadows pooled like secrets, the air alive with the promise of confrontation. Ethan's grip tightened on the throttle, the serpent on his arm a living vow. Saving Lily wasn't just about one girl. It was reclaiming the honor Marcus died for, mending the fractures one ride at a time. Dawn had brought allies, but twilight would test them, the oath's fire burning brighter against the gathering dark. The convoy thundered northward through the whispering hills, a serpent of chrome and leather uncoiling against the canyon walls that rose like silent judges under the climbing sun. Dust trailed in their wake, a golden haze that caught the light and shimmered like forgotten dreams, while the air hummed with the symphony of engines, deep, resonant roars blending into a single, defiant pulse. Ethan rode at the heart of it, Lily's arms secure around his waist, her presence a quiet warmth that steadied the churn in his gut. The standoff at the crossroads lingered, like the acrid bite of exhaust on his tongue, Voss's retreating glare a promise of shadows yet to fall. But for now, the road was theirs, winding through red rock passages where the scent of sun-baked pine mingled with the faint metallic tang of overheated brakes. Caleb pulled alongside for a stretch, his massive bike dwarfing the others, the wind whipping his salt-and-pepper beard into wild strands. He shouted over the din, voice gravelly as canyon gravel. "Clubhouse is just over the ridge, brother. Been quiet since you ghosted, mostly repairs and the odd charity run. But the boys, they're solid. Jack's fixed up the old generator. Harlan's got the medkit stocked like we're prepping for war." Ethan nodded, his eyes fixed on the horizon where the hills folded into a hidden valley, the clubhouse, a sanctuary etched into memory. Weathered barn doors creaking on rusted hinges, walls papered with faded photos of rides past, the central fire pit ringed by logs scarred from countless nights of shared silences. It was more than a hideout. It was the forge where oaths were hammered true, where men like them, adrift from blood ties, found brothers in the roar of the night. As the group crested the ridge, the valley unfolded below, a cradle of green amid the arid sprawl, the clubhouse squatting like a steadfast guardian at its edge. Smoke curled lazily from a chimney, carrying the faint aroma of charred wood and fresh coffee, a beacon that tugged at Ethan's chest with unexpected ache. He downshifted, the Harley responding with a throaty sigh, and led the descent, the convoy fanning out like wings around him. Lily lifted her head, peering over his shoulder, her breath catching at the sight. "Is that home?" she whispered, the word fragile as a first rain. Ethan felt it echo in him, stirring the hollow where his own home had crumbled. Nights alone in motel rooms, the divorce papers ink as dry as his regrets. "For now," he replied, the wind stealing the softness from his tone. "Safe harbor till we sort this." They rolled to a halt in the gravel yard, engines cutting off one by one in a cascading silence, broken only by the crunch of boots and the distant call of a raven wheeling overhead. The clubhouse doors swung open, spilling out more riders, a dozen strong, faces weathered by sun and story, jackets emblazoned with the coiled serpent that gleamed like a vow renewed. Harlan, the ex-nurse with hands steady as a surgeon's, approached first, his broad frame blocking the sun as he knelt to Lily's level. "Hey there, little one. Name's Harlan. You hungry? Got stew on. Real stuff, not diner slop." Lily hesitated, then nodded, sliding from the bike with Ethan's help, her backpack slung like a shield. The warmth in Harlan's eyes, the easy nod from Jack's as he wheeled his bike into the shade. It was the quiet weave of family, chosen in the margins, where loyalty outshone the scars. Inside, the air was thick with the comforting musk of aged leather and oiled metal, walls flickering under the soft glow of lanterns strung from rafters. A long oak table dominated the center, etched with initials from rides long past, surrounded by mismatched chairs that groaned under the weight of gathering men. Caleb poured coffee from a dented pot, the steam rising like morning mist, and passed mugs around, the bitter aroma grounding the room. Ethan settled Lily at the table with a bowl of stew, chunks of venison in a rich broth scented with thyme from the valley's edge, before turning to the group. Maps were unrolled, yellowed edges curling like old wounds, marking routes and blind spots where the tin wolves patrolled. "Voss won't quit," Ethan said, his voice low, tracing a finger along the highway lines. "He's got the sheriff's ear, and that ear listens to whoever lines the pockets." Lily's story. It points to bigger rot, truckers, badges, maybe even the diner owner in on it. Murmurs rippled, heads nodding in grim accord. Jax leaned forward, his limp forgotten in the heat of purpose, fingers drumming the table like Morse code. "Heard whispers last run. Girls going missing along Route 17, chalked up to runaways. But the patterns, they tie back to that stretch, the mirage and beyond. If we're in, we dig quiet. No guns, no glory, just truth, like Marcus taught." The name hung in the air, a talisman invoking the founder who'd pulled them from war's wreckage into this brotherhood. His last breath a charge to protect the vulnerable against the world's grind. Ethan felt the serpent tattoo warm against his skin, as if alive, pulsing with the collective heartbeat of the room. Lily ate slowly, listening, her eyes flicking between faces, absorbing the unspoken code. Honor wasn't shouted, it was lived in the spaces between words. As afternoon shadows lengthened across the floorboards, stretching like fingers toward the hearth, a plan took shape. Scouts to trace the diner's underbelly, Harlan to check local whispers through his old hospital contacts, the rest to fortify the perimeter. But doubt gnawed at Ethan, a quiet storm behind his steady gaze. Rallying the oath had mended fractures, drawing in strays like old flames to a bonfire. Yet it unearthed his own buried shame. The night he'd ridden away from a similar call, too lost in personal ruin to stand. Lily's presence, her innocent trust, mirrored that failure, demanding redemption not in spectacle, but in the steady grind of justice. She finished her stew, pushing the bowl aside, and looked up at him. "You all. You're like the riders Mum described, keeping promises even when it's hard. Her words, simple as valley wind, sealed the room's resolve, weaving her into their fold. Outside, the sun dipped toward the hills, painting the yard in hues of amber and rust, the air cooling with the promise of evening chill. Ethan stepped onto the porch, the wood creaking underfoot, and lit a cigarette, the match's flare brief as a heartbeat. Caleb joined him, clapping a hand on his shoulder, the gesture heavy with years. "This girl's got you lit up, Blackwood, like the old days." Ethan exhaled smoke into the twilight, watching fireflies wink to life in the scrub. "More than that, she's the reminder we needed. But if Voss circles back—" Caleb's nod was firm, eyes reflecting the fading light. "Then we stand. Oath's iron, brother. Bends, but don't break." Night fell soft over the valley, stars pricking the velvet sky like scattered oaths. Inside, laughter mingled with low talk around the fire pit, flames crackling with the scent of mesquite, casting dancing shadows on faces etched by loyalty. Lily dozed on a cot, blanket tucked by Harlan's careful hands, while Ethan stared into the embers, the road ahead twisting with unseen trials. The wolves would howl again, corruption's jaws snapping at their heels. But here, in this chosen family, the fire of promise burned eternal, a quiet force against the dark, ready to illuminate the truth that could shatter chains. If this tale of unbreakable bonds is stirring something in you, smash that like button. It helps these stories reach more hearts in need of light. The fire pit's embers glowed like dying stars in the valley's embrace, casting flickering shadows across the clubhouse yard where the iron oath riders gathered in loose knots, their voices a low murmur blending with the night's chorus of crickets and distant coyote calls. The air hung heavy with the smoky tang of mesquite and the faint lingering sharpness of gun oil from the perimeter checks, though no one spoke of arms. The oath's strength lay in vigilance, not provocation. Ethan leaned against the porch railing, the wood rough under his palms, his eyes tracing the serpentine path of the driveway that snaked into the hills. Lily slept soundly inside, her breathing even through the cracked window, a fragile rhythm that anchored him amid the gathering storm. The day's plan had set roots, but roots in this soil grew thorns. Whispers of the tin wolves' reach extended further than Voss's glare suggested, tendrils into the very towns they aimed to protect. Caleb emerged from the shadows, a steaming mug in each hand, the coffee's bitter aroma cutting through the chill. He handed one to Ethan, settling his bulk against the rail with a creak that echoed the night's quiet unrest. "Scouts are out." Jax took the east flank toward the Mirage. Harlan's lining up a contact at the old clinic down in Hollow Bend. Girl's story checks fragments, missing reports scattered like buckshot, but nothing official, badges burying it deep. Ethan's fingers tightened around the mug, the heat seeping into his calluses like a slow burn of memory. He thought of Marcus's last ride, the way the founder's bike had fishtailed on rain-slicked blacktop before the crash that stole him. "A accident," the sheriff's log called it, but the oath knew the skid marks lied. Corruption wasn't a sudden storm, it was the steady erosion of truth, washing away the innocent until only the wolves remained. Inside, the clubhouse thrummed with subdued purpose. Jax returned first, dust-caked and lean as a whip, slipping through the door with the stealth of his Marine days. He dropped a crumpled napkin on the table, the same kind Lily had clutched at the diner, its edges stained with faint lipstick, a marker from the counter where the truckers had sat. "Overheard the owner talking to a deputy on the back line," Jack said, his voice a hushed rasp, wiping sweat from his brow that carried the desert's salt. "Not just chasers, it's a pipeline. Girls like her funneled through, payoffs to look away. Voss's name dropped twice, like he's the gatekeeper." The room stilled, lanterns swaying gently, their light dancing across faces etched with the weight of it. Harlan nodded from his corner, bandaging a minor scrape from the ride, his nurse's precision turning the act into quiet ritual. Clinic logs match, unexplained injuries, runaways, treated and released to no one. One entry. Echoes Lily's mom. Name was Sarah, years back. Same green eyes, same fear. Lily stirred at the sound of her name, padding out in socked feet, blanket draped like a cape. The riders paused, their circle opening to her without a word, a silent invitation into the fold. She rubbed her eyes, the firelight gilding her tousled hair, and perched on a log near Ethan, drawing her knees up. Sarah. That's Mom. She never said much about after the rider helped her, just that she found a new start, away from the bad places. But lately, letters came, warnings. Said the shadows followed. Her voice trembled on the edge of the flames, small but unyielding, pulling confessions from the night like threads from a loom. Ethan knelt beside her, the gravel biting his knees, and placed a hand on her shoulder, light, reassuring, the touch of an uncle forged in crisis. Shadows got names now. We're naming 'em. The revelation hung, thickening the air with resolve. But doubt flickered in the embers. Caleb paced the yard, boots crunching leaves, his mind turning over the fractures. This pulls us against more than Voss. Sheriffs tied to county brass, maybe state. One wrong move, and we're the villains in their book. Outlaws raiding the innocent. He stopped, facing Ethan, the fire reflecting in his eyes like tempered steel. You walked once, brother. After Marcus. Said the oath was poison. What changed? The question sliced clean, exposing the scar of Ethan's exile. The divorce that had hollowed him, the bottle that followed, rides that blurred into numbness until the promise to Marcus became just another ghost. He met Caleb's gaze, the serpent tattoo a warm coil under his sleeve. Her, Ethan said simply, nodding to Lily. And you all. Family ain't born. It's chosen in the fire. I forgot that, won't again. As midnight deepened, the group dispersed into watches, engines silent but senses sharp, the valley's hush broken only by the occasional hoot of an owl patrolling the ridge. Ethan guided Lily back inside, the floorboards groaning like old bones, and settled her by the hearth where a low fire banked against the cold. She clutched her backpack, pulling out a faded photo. Sarah, young and smiling, arm around a shadowy figure on a bike that could have been any Harley's twin. She kept this, said the rider's promise saved her, made her believe in good men. Ethan's throat tightened, the image blurring with his own faded regrets, the daughter he'd lost to courtrooms and distance. He sat beside her, the warmth of the flames bridging their silences. We'll make sure yours holds, kid. Oaths iron, bends but don't break. Dawn crept in with a pale blush over the hills, the first light filtering through cracks in the barn walls, carrying the fresh scent of dew on sage and the distant rumble of an approaching rig. Harlan burst through the door, face flushed, a radio crackling in his hand. Jax is pinned, East Trail, 2 cruisers boxing him in, Voss's lead calling it a warrant check. They're twisting it, saying we're harboring a fugitive. The room ignited, riders scrambling for jackets and keys, the air electric with the surge of brotherhood. Ethan stood, Lily's hand in his, her eyes wide but steady. Mount up, he commanded, voice steady as the engine's roar. We ride for Jax. Show 'em the oath ain't fractured. It's forged anew. The convoy erupted from the yard, a thunder of Harleys tearing up the ridge path, dust billowing like a battle banner against the rising sun. Ethan rode point, Lily secured behind Caleb in the pack, the wind whipping with the urgency of unfinished vows. The trail twisted through scrub and stone, the scent of pine giving way to the sharp bite of exhaust as they closed on the ambush. Ahead, Jax's bike idled cornered, Voss's cruisers flanking like predators, but the oath's arrival shifted the balance, a wall of chrome and loyalty rolling in like judgment. No shots fired, no charges drawn, just the unyielding presence of men who honored promises over power. Their engines a roar that echoed Marcus's legacy. Voss stepped out, face paling at the numbers, but Ethan dismounted, eyes locked. This ends with truth, deputy, or it ends with yours. The standoff stretched taut as bowstring, the sun climbing to illuminate the cracks in Voss's armor. A hesitant glance, a radio fumble. Lily's words from the night before echoed in Ethan's mind. A salve against the tension, promises that saved. As the deputies retreated once more, tails between legs, the oath reformed, Jax clapping shoulders in silent thanks. But Ethan knew the wolves' retreat was faint. Deeper rot festered, demanding confrontation. The ride back carried a new weight, bonds tempered in the morning light, the family chosen standing taller against the encroaching dark. Redemption wasn't a single dawn. It was the endless road, paved with honor's quiet fire. The sun hung high over the whispering hills as the Iron Oath convoy wound back toward the clubhouse, a serpent of dust and determination carving through the canyon's throat. Engines thrummed in harmonious discord, the vibration humming through Ethan's grip on the handlebars. Syncing with the steady beat of his heart, a rhythm reclaimed from years of solitary echoes. Lily rode pillion behind Caleb now, her small frame nestled against his broad back, the wind tousling her hair like whispers of newfound safety. The rescue of Jax had been bloodless, a standoff won by sheer presence, the deputies' cruisers vanishing down the trail like scolded shadows. But victory tasted bittersweet on Ethan's tongue, laced with the dry grit of unfinished business. Voss's retreat wasn't surrender. It was a coiling, the prelude to a strike from deeper in the rot. The valley welcomed them with open arms of sun-dappled green, the clubhouse emerging like a weathered sentinel, its tin roof glinting under the midday blaze. The air shimmered with heat, carrying the sharp scent of sagebrush crushed under tires and the faint, comforting undertone of cooling engines as the group dismounted. Jax rolled his bike to the shade of the old oak, clapping Ethan on the shoulder with a grin that split his weathered face, eyes alight with the fire of brotherhood renewed. "Oh, you won, Blackwood. Thought I'd be explaining my dents to Marcus up there." Ethan nodded, the weight of the founder's name settling like a familiar cloak, warm against the chill of doubt. Around them, riders exchanged grips and murmurs, the yard alive with the creak of leather and the low chuckle of relief. Bonds mended in the forge of the morning's trial. Inside, the clubhouse enveloped them in its familiar embrace, the musk of polished wood and faint tobacco smoke mingling with the richer aroma of Harlan's fresh-brewed stew simmering on the stove. Lily slipped from Caleb's shadow, her steps tentative but surer, drawn to the long table where maps lay unfurled like battle plans etched in faded ink. She traced a finger along the lines marking Route 17, her green eyes shadowed by the revelations of the night. Ethan watched her, the serpent tattoo on his arm itching as if awakening to her quiet gravity. She'd bridged his isolation with words at the roadside, but now, in this den of chosen kin, she was weaving herself into the fabric of their oath, a thread of innocence demanding they rise above the fractures. Caleb gathered the core around the hearth, flames crackling softly in the stone pit, casting golden flickers across faces honed by time and trial. Jax's close call confirms it. Voss is tightening the noose. That warrant was smoke. They're probing for weakness, testing if we've truly scattered. Harlan nodded, his nurse's hands folding a clean cloth as he spoke, voice steady as a pulse. My contact at the clinic pieced more. Sarah, Lily's mom, showed up years back, signs of distress from a rough escape, treated and sent on her way, but the logs hint at pressure from above to hush it. Patterns match recent cases, girls vanishing into the pipeline chalked up to wanderlust. Lily's breath hitched, her hand pausing on the map, the paper crinkling under her touch like a fragile confession. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on the scarred oak, the wood's grain rough against his skin. Memories surfaced unbidden. The rain-lashed night, Marcus had pulled him from a foxhole, binding him to the oath with a bloodied handshake and a vow to shield the overlooked. "This ain't just about Lily anymore," he said, his voice gravel low, resonating in the room's hush. It's the promise we all carry. Wolves in badges, feeding on the forgotten. We call 'em out, or we let the rot spread till it claims us too. Murmurs of assent rippled, Jax's limp forgotten as he sketched a route on the map, his pencil scratching like determined footsteps. The plan evolved, a midnight ride to the mirage, not for confrontation, but evidence, witnesses to sway, records to unearth, truth as their blade against corruption's veil. As evening draped the valley in twilight's soft indigo, the group scattered to prepare, the yard filling with the clink of tools and the murmur of strategy. Lily found Ethan on the porch, the boards groaning under his weight as he stared at the stars emerging like distant allies. She settled beside him, her backpack at her feet, the photo of Sarah peeking from its flap. "You look like him," she said softly, the words carrying the weight of her mother's tale. "The rider who helped her. Tired eyes but kind. She said he carried scars, but they made him stronger." Ethan turned, the cool night air brushing his face with the scent of blooming night jasmine from the valley floor. Her trust pierced him, echoing the void left by his daughter's absence, a loss that had driven him to the road's anonymity. "Scars are just maps, kid," he replied, his hand resting near hers on the rail. "Lead you back to what matters, like this." The fire pit reignited as dusk deepened, flames leaping with fresh logs, their crackle underscoring tales swapped around the circle, rides that tested loyalty, losses that forged it unbreakable. Caleb recounted the raid that took Marcus, his voice thick with the smoke, painting the scene in vivid strokes, flashing lights piercing the storm, brothers standing firm as the badges twisted protection into peril. Lily listened, wide-eyed, absorbing the legacy, her presence a quiet catalyst mending old rifts. Harlan passed her a mug of cocoa, steam curling like valley mist, and she smiled, a small bloom in the gathering dark that lit the faces around her. Ethan felt the shift, the oath no longer remnants but a whole, pulses aligned in purpose. Redemption wasn't a solitary dawn. It was this, the chosen family rising, honoring vows in the face of encroaching night. Midnight approached on silent wings, the moon silvering the hills as the convoy assembled in the yard, engines purring like watchful beasts. Ethan mounted his Harley, Lily secured once more behind a trusted rider, Harlan this time, his steady frame a bulwark. "We ride for truth," Ethan called, his voice cutting the chill, igniting the group. The gates creaked open, and they surged forth, a river of chrome threading the dark trails, the wind carrying the pine-scented promise of confrontation. The mirage loomed in their path, its neon a false beacon, but the oath approached not as invaders, but guardians, ready to illuminate the shadows, to fulfill the oath that had saved a rider's soul through a girl's desperate words. Doubt flickered in Ethan's mind as the road curved, the engine's thrum a counterpoint to his thoughts. Voss's web was vast, but so was their bond. Lily's story had reignited the fire, turning ghosts into allies. The miles blurred, the air alive with anticipation, the serpent emblem on every jacket a silent vow against the wolves. Justice waited in the neon's glow, moral and unyielding. The climax of promises long buried now rising to claim the light. The neon haze of the last mirage flickered like a faltering heartbeat against the midnight sky. Its buzz a hollow echo swallowed by the low growl of the Iron Oath convoy as they crested the final rise. Ethan led the pack, his Harley's headlight piercing the gloom like a blade of resolve. The engine's thrum vibrating through his chest in sync with the night's tense pulse. The air hung thick with the scent of cooling asphalt and distant rain, laced with the faint, greasy whisper of the diner's exhaust vents. Shadows pooled around the parking lot, where a lone semi idled like a sleeping giant, its driver oblivious to the serpent uncoiling from the dark. Lily rode secure behind Harlan, her arms wrapped tight around his waist. the wind's chill nipping at her cheeks, but unable to dim the quiet fire in her eyes, the same fire that had sparked Ethan's rebirth hours ago on that dusty pull-off. Caleb flanked Ethan, his massive frame cutting a silhouette against the moonlit scrub, signaling the group to fan out in a loose perimeter. Silent guardians circling the prey without a snarl. No engines roared to life inside. This was no raid, but a surgical unveiling, truth as their unyielding weapon against the web of whispers and payoffs. Ethan killed his ignition first, the sudden silence amplifying the crunch of gravel under boots as the riders dismounted, leather creaking like aged confessions. Jax slipped toward the back alley, his limp a mere shadow in the stealth of his approach, while Harlan guided Lily to a sheltered vantage near the bikes, his voice a low murmur. "Stay put, little one. We've got the watch." She nodded, clutching her backpack, the faded photo of her mother, a talisman against the uncertainty, her trust in these chosen brothers, a bridge over the chasm of her fears. The diner door swung open with a jingle that sliced the quiet, spilling warm light and the stale aroma of burnt coffee onto the lot. The owner, a wiry man named Tate, face etched with the lines of too many late shifts, froze mid-wipe of the counter, his rag dangling like a white flag as Ethan's shadow filled the threshold. Behind him, Caleb loomed, a wall of unmovable intent, while the other riders held the flanks, their presence a subtle pressure that thickened the air. Tate's eyes darted to the window, spotting the serpent patches glinting under the neon, and his hand trembled as he set down the rag. "Blackwood," he rasped, voice laced with the sour edge of recognition. "Heard you been stirring dust. Cops already called. Said you're trouble, harboring runaways." Ethan stepped inside, the floorboards groaning under his boots, the scent of frying oil clinging to his jacket like accusation. "Not trouble," Ethan replied, his tone even as forged steel, eyes locking on Tate's with the weight of unspoken oaths. "Truth. Lily's story. Girls vanishing from your counter, truckers with deep pockets, badges turning blind. Sarah was one, years back. Green eyes, running scared, you remember?" Tate paled, his gaze flicking to a back-office door where shadows shifted uneasily. The air grew heavier, charged with the unspoken rot that festered here. Envelopes passed under tables, girls directed to safe rides that led to oblivion. Lily's mother had escaped once, but the pipeline persisted, a vein of corruption feeding the Tin Wolf's greed. From the alley, Jack signaled, a thumbs up, his quick hands unearthing a ledger from a trash bin, pages yellowed with hurried notes, dates, descriptions, payoffs initialed with Voss's scrawled V. Caleb moved like a tide, blocking the office door before Tate could bolt, his voice a rumble that vibrated the glassware. "No running tonight, oaths about protection, not predation. Marcus taught us that. Stand for the forgotten when the stars pin you down." Tate sagged against the counter, the fight leaching from him like air from a punctured tire, confessions spilling in fragments, the sheriff's demands, the fear of reprisal, the quiet complicity that had trapped him in this neon cage. Outside, Harlan kept Lily close, the diner's lights casting her face in soft relief. Her breath steady as she whispered, "They're doing it. Like Mom said, promises that hold." The words carried to Ethan through the open door, a lifeline pulling him from the edge of old doubts, the divorce's scars and lost daughter's echo fading against this reclaimed purpose. As dawn's first grey threads wove into the sky, Voss's cruiser crested the horizon, lights flashing silent warnings. But the tide had turned. Jax emerged with the ledger clutched like evidence of light, riders forming a chain of solidarity that no badge could breach. Voss dismounted, face twisted in the paling light, but the ledger's weight, names, dates, trails of graft, hung between them like judgment. This is interference," he snarled, but his voice cracked. The rot exposed under the unrelenting gaze of the oath. Ethan stepped forward, the serpent on his arm catching the light, a symbol of vows unbroken. Interference? Nah, justice, the kind that sticks without the tin. Deputies flanked Voss, but hesitation rippled through them. Whispers of internal probes, the ledger a spark that could ignite their own downfall. Voss retreated, cruiser peeling away into the dust, the pipeline cracked, truth set to flow toward reckoning. The convoy reformed as the sun breached the hills, gilding the mirage in reluctant gold, the air alive with the fresh bite of morning sage and the promise of open roads. Lily mounted behind Ethan now, her arms around him a circle completed, the backpack lighter without its burdens. Riders exchanged nods. The fractures mended in the night's forge. Jax's grin fierce, Harlan's steady clap on Caleb's shoulder, the brotherhood whole, a family etched in chrome and loyalty. Ethan gunned the throttle, the Harley surging forward, engines blending into a triumphant roar that echoed through the canyons. Miles blurred, the valley receding like shed shadows, but the oath burned brighter. Promises that survived the dark, redeeming a rider through a girl's words, building legacies from quiet courage. Back at the clubhouse, under the noon sun's warm gaze, Lily stood in the yard, the photo of Sarah tucked away, her eyes on the horizon where new paths beckoned. Ethan watched from the porch, the weight of Marcus's vow lifted, replaced by purpose shared. "You saved more than me that night," she said, turning to him with a smile that bridged years. "You saved us all." He nodded, the wind carrying the scent of pine and freedom, the iron oath alive, guardians against the wolves, their fire a beacon for the lost. Redemption rode with them, eternal as the road. If these tales of honor and chosen kin have touched your soul, thank you for joining the ride. Hit subscribe to keep the stories rolling, and let's build this family of light together.